Hello all, I'm Rahul Pai and this video is one of the two educational videos about crystalline silicon solar cells. It is split into two parts. Those who are interested to have a brief general overview about the defects in silicon can have a look at this video, and those who are interested in the modeling of silicon solar cells using some defects can have a look at part 2. For modeling of crystalline silicon solar cells, we'll be using a software called as WXAMPS, which stands for Analysis of Microelectronics and Photonic Structures. So those who are interested to download this software can go have a visit to this link and you can download it. So first we'll start with the defects in silicon. So why are we even discussing about the defects in silicon? Because as it is said, a man is like a crystal. Defects in him make him interesting. So now we'll have a look at the crystal defects in silicon. So they are grouped as unintentional or intentional. Usually intentional crystal defects are being added to improve the performance of the photovoltaics, and that is done by doping. But unintentional defects can be one-dimensional point defects or two-dimensional line defects. But before understanding all these defects, let us first understand the crystal structure of silicon. So silicon has a basic diamond-like crystal structure. It has two merged face-centered cubic cells. This is a face-centered cubic cell. When two of them are merged, we get a structure something like this. And when we remove the atoms outside the cell, we get this. So here there is one animation of a crystal structure of silicon, and we can see how these atoms are bonded. The atomic density of silicon is 5 into 10 raised to 22 atoms per centimeter cube. For its application in photovoltaics, we need it to be extremely pure. That is, the purity should be 99.999% and impurities should be in the range of parts per billion. Now we'll have a look at unintentional defects, that is lattice defects or dislocations. This is 1D line defects. So this is a part of edge dislocation. The edge defect can be easily visualized as an extra half plane of atoms in the lattice. The extra half plane can be seen over here. The dislocation over here is called a line defect because the locus of defective points produced in the lattice by dislocation, they lie along the same line. If you can see over here, they lie in the same line, and this line runs along the top of the extra half plane, and hence it is called as a line defect. Now moving on to the point defects. Now a vacancy defect is formed when the silicon which was initially present over here just moves out from the lattice. A Frankel defect is being produced when a silicon which was initially over here goes and takes some place which was initially void. And an interstitial defect takes place when an additional silicon atom from somewhere else gets into the void space. There can be unintentional defects also, which are usually incorporated while manufacturing, and for example the carbon atom which took place in between the silicon atoms. Now we'll have a look at the manufacturing process of pure silicon. Usually the process which is adapted is Zolarsky growth process, and in this process we obtain single crystals of silicon. In this process we have molten silicon in a crucible at 1500 degrees Celsius. This crucible is made of quartz. Then we have a rod which is properly oriented and has a seed crystal in top of it. Then with very precise pulling and rotation simultaneously, we make this ingot. This whole process takes place in an inert environment so that impurities in the air don't cause any defects in this ingot. Proper care is taken so that there is not much temperature gradient in this molten solution and the ingot. Usually impurities are added intentionally to improve the electrical properties of the pure silicon. So silicon has 4 electrons in its outer shell, and it is bonded with other 4 silicon atoms. If we want to make it a n-type material, that is with more electrons, we want to dope it with group 5 material. So a group 5 material will be phosphorus. It has 5 electrons in its outer shell. It bonds with other 4 silicon atoms, but 1 electron is in excess, which can be excited and sent into conduction band. If we want to dope it with a P type of a material, which is usually a group 3 material, which has only 3 electrons in its outer shell, and it leaves a whole pair vacant, and thus we get a P type and an N type material. So in a P type material, the Fermi level will be close to the valence band, and it can be calculated using this formula. In an N type material, wherein there is more of phosphorus or group 5 materials, the Fermi level will shift towards conduction band because there are a lot of electrons. This area has lot of holes. This area has lot of electrons. This is before contact. When they are when both the materials are made contact, the Fermi level will try to align itself, and there will be a band bending. So we can see this band bending, and this is the depletion. So we need solar cells which are very strong absorbers over a useful wavelength of our AM 1.5G solar spectrum. So we know that the absorption of different materials is different, and absorption for a certain material is given by Beer-Lambert's law. The absorption is different depending upon whether the material is a direct band gap material or an indirect band gap material. Suppose say our material absorbs 99% of light, then this I by I naught will be 0.01. And then we can calculate how much our material's thickness will be based on the absorption of that material. This you will get from the graph, absorption coefficient. Now moving on to the diffusion of carriers. So we know that the minority carriers are transported through the diffusion layer, and the majority carriers are transported through the load. So in this diagram we have N side and P side. So the N side is doped with an N-type material, which and hence the concentration of the dopant is 10 raised to 19. We can calculate the minority carrier using this formula, where N and P are electrons and holes. So in over here, this will be 10 raised to 19. We can calculate P. Nd is the intrinsic concentration of silicon, which is 10 raised to 10. So 10 raised to 10 the whole square by 10 raised to 19, we get minority carrier concentration. So when these junctions are connected, we can see there is a diffusion because of the concentration gradient, 10 raised to 19, 10 raised to 4, 10 raised to 16, and this is 10. So this is a very high concentration gradient, and hence we can see this. So the minority carriers diffuse through the junction, and hence we want a very high purity of this material so that they don't recombine, and also very high mobility so that they can cover more distance. So the problem which arises over here is when we dope it very high. If we dope it very high, then the mobilities are reduced, and hence we want a very optimum dopant concentration. The lifetime of these carriers is also very important, and the open circuit voltage also plays a very important role because that is dependent on the lifetime of these carriers. So minority carrier diffusion lengths should be higher than the thickness of that material so that they can reach the surface or the junction, and the surface recombination velocities must also be kept very low. Moving on to this, so this is the depletion width, and this is the quasi-neutral region. So this is P doped, this is N doped. So this, if the P type material is doped more than N type material, then we get this depletion width of P type to be much less as compared to the N type. If we dope N type material more than the P type material, then we'll get smaller depletion width on the N side and more depletion width on the P side. So how can we measure defects? So structural and chemical configuration can be measured using transmission electron spectroscopy or EPR, electron paramagnetic resonance. The optical properties, local vibrational modes, can be studied using FTIR, Fourier transform, infrared spectroscopy. So to know more about the defects in crystalline silicon solar cell, please watch my video 2. Thank you.